the shadows, bound for the gallows, a dead man walking, till love came calling. Rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. 6 feet under, I thought it was over, and answered a prayer, the voice of a savior. Rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. All at once I came alive, this beating heart, these open eyes, the grave let go, the darkness should have known. You're still rolling stone. You're still rolling stone.
Hey, welcome, and thank you for joining us this week. Whether you're watching online or you're joining us in person, it is great that you are connecting with us. The reason I'm doing the announcements this week is I'm actually away. I'm up in Collingwood talking about the work that I'm also involved in the prisons in Malawi. And so I just wanted to give a quick hello and talk about just a couple of things that are upcoming in the life of our community. And the first one is with regards to Christmas. I know it seems really hard to believe with the great weather we've been having, and it doesn't really feel like getting closer to Christmas, but the sleeps are getting less and less. And so if you lost this week as a chance to put up Christmas lights, you may be regretting it coming down the line. But one of the things I want to say is we're excited about what's going to be happening as we enter into this Christmas season, this time of celebrating this amazing reality of God with us. We have a couple of exciting things that we're going to be telling you more about in the coming weeks. But one thing is we want your feedback on Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve for us as a church and for us as a community is always a real special and significant night. Obviously, it's going to be different this year, and so we want your feedback. Whether you're comfortable coming in person or prefer online, we would love to hear from you. And so we've set up a survey on Facebook, our Facebook page. If you go there, you can check it out, and that would be amazing. But know this, either way, whether in person or online, it's a chance for us, again, to connect with one another. Second thing I want to mention is with regards to our youth. And so if you're in grades 5 to 12, this is when you kind of want to listen in a little bit more. On Wednesdays, every Wednesday for high school age youth, they're meeting at the church from 7 to 8:30, just having a great time getting to know one another, playing games, and then ultimately learning about faith. The second thing is we're also restarted our junior youth, our epic youth. That's grades 5 to 8. We met for the first time last week, and we're going to continue to meet in the coming weeks. Again, on Wednesdays, just not every week. And so if you want any information or have some questions, send me an email and I will get it to the appropriate people. Now, one of the reasons I'm doing the announcements this week is there's real special announcement. An announcement that is probably not really a surprise to many of you, but I wanted to make it. And it's simply this, that session leadership of the church decided about 2 weeks ago to offer the permanent position to Wanda to lead our music ministry. As you've seen online or whether you've been in person, it's a real gift to have Wanda with us. And so we wanted to welcome her and say thank you for joining us and for being a part of our team. And we're really, really excited about what God is going to do next. And so that's really it for me. I hope you do well, hope you have a great week, and hope we can continue to connect. And so now I'm going to actually pass it on to Wanda and the others as they lead us in music here today. Have a great week.
I'm just here for a few years, passing through in time to a home where Jesus is, building mansions high. Heaven is home. Heaven is home. Running to the finish is home. Heaven is home. Streets of golden, endless lights, the presence of our God lives with us forever. No more tears, no more nights, we'll come and sing to God who lives with us forever. Forever. Living to make Jesus known in this temporal home, just to leave our trail of hope, so the world will know heaven is home. Heaven is home. Streets of golden, endless lights, the presence of our God lives with us forever. No more tears, no more nights, we'll come and sing to God who lives with us forever. Streets of golden, endless lights, the presence of our God lives with us forever. No more tears, no more nights, we'll come and sing to God who lives with us forever. Whoa. Singing glory, 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 worthy, 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 holy, holy, holy. Glory, 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 worthy, 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 holy, holy, holy. Singing glory, 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 worthy, 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 holy, holy, holy. Glory, 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 worthy, 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 holy, holy, holy. Streets of golden, endless lights, the presence of our God lives with us forever. No more tears, no more nights, we'll come and sing to God who lives with us forever. Whoa. Forever. Singing glory, 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 worthy, 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 holy, holy, holy. Singing glory, 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 worthy, 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 holy, holy, holy. Singing glory, 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 worthy, 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 holy, holy, holy. Glory, 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 worthy, 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 holy, holy, holy.
Keep on asking, keep on seeking, keep on knocking. You will find, you will find. Keep on praying, keep believing, keep on kneeling. God is on your side, He's on your side.
Everyone who asks receives, everyone who seeks will find. Everyone who knocks, the door will be open wide. Following the way of God, Let faith rise. Let faith rise.
Keep on asking, keep on seeking, keep on knocking. You will find, keep on praying, keep believing, keep on kneeling. God is on your side, He's on your side.
Everyone who asks receives, everyone who seeks will find, everyone who knocks the door will be open wide. Following the way of God, following after His heart. Everyone who asks receives the good gifts of God. Let faith rise. Let faith rise.
God is big, God is smart. He's aware of who we are. God inhabits all His kids to do impossible things.
Let faith rise. Let faith rise. Everyone who asks receives, everyone who seeks will find, everyone who knocks the door will be open wide. Following the way of God, following after His heart. Everyone who asks receives the good gifts of God. Let faith rise. Let faith rise. Let faith rise. Let faith rise.
As we look at our text this morning, I'd like to ask you a question. Do you know the name of this young lady that you see on the screen? Her first name is Malala. Many of you might be familiar with her story. Many of you might have never heard of her in the past. A young girl, she was growing up in a remote village in Pakistan. One day, as she was traveling to school on a bus, a gunman boarded the bus and said, "Who is Malala?" When she was identified, he shot her in the head. 10 days later, she woke up in a hospital in Birmingham, England, and she had survived the attack of the Taliban. Why would they want to shoot a 15-year-old girl? The reason was she wanted girls to have an education as much as boys, and the Taliban completely forbade it. In the year 2012, she was the youngest person ever to win the Nobel Peace Prize, as she advocated for education for young women. Today she lives in England, and in 2018 she went back for the very first time to her village where she had grown up. Many of you maybe did not know her name, and to the whole world initially she was just a very ordinary young person. Lots of ordinary people. I'm sure that you might consider yourself to be very ordinary. The one person who didn't think he was ordinary was Winston Churchill. I love the quote when he said, "We are all worms, but I believe that I am a glowworm." I much prefer the thoughts of Abraham Lincoln, and I'm going to paraphrase what he said. He said God must have loved ordinary people because he made so many of them. Ordinary people, people just like you and people like me. People who maybe are called to do things in different ways. We live different lifestyles. We have different backgrounds. But we mostly consider ourselves to be ordinary people. But I am convinced that it is amazing what God can do and accomplish through ordinary people if they are willing to be committed and following him. Today I'd like to introduce you to an individual who was just a very ordinary young man. But I believe that the principles of his life can help us to grasp how God can use ordinary people if they have bold faith and are willing to trust him completely. To understand this young man's story, we need the backstory. The nation of Israel is almost like the wave of the sea. At the crest, they are following God, and then they get into the trough because they abandon God and life becomes difficult. And we see this over and over again in the history of the Israelites. The story begins in the book of Judges, chapter 6. And the Israelites are in a dark place. This is what we read. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. So the Lord handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. The Midianites were so cruel that the Israelites made hiding places for themselves in the mountains, caves, and strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, marauders from Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east would attack Israel, camping in the land and destroying crops as far away as Gaza. They left the Israelites with nothing to eat, taking all the sheep, goats, cattle, and donkeys. These empty hordes, coming with their livestock and tents, were as thick as locusts. They arrived on droves of camels, too numerous to count, and they stayed until the land was stripped bare. So Israel was reduced to starvation by the Midianites. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. And very often in the history of Israel, we find that phrase, that when they are in the dark place, that they begin to call out to God for help. And so God answered their plea, and he came to a young man whose name was Gideon. And through this young man, God was going to bring hope and help to the nation that he loved. As we continue the backstory, we find Gideon in this place of despair and discouragement. He lives on the family farm, and they have harvested the crops, but the wheat has to be beaten. And so we find him in a cave beating the wheat because he is trying to hide from these people called the Midianites. Because if the Midianites discovered him, they would take everything that he had, and they might not even hesitate to take his life. We don't often understand how cruel some people were in that day, and the Midianites would think nothing of taking the life of an individual. So for Gideon, it must have been a very discouraging and heartbreaking existence, frustrating to no end because you work so hard and in the end you have nothing. And so they wanted to often be certain that they would have a good crop, and even though they were to worship the Lord and him alone, they began to worship the gods of the nations around them, the worship of Baal, who was a fertility god, hoping that perhaps it would increase the productivity of their crops. They were going to hedge their bets by having as many religions as possible, thinking it all might come to some good, so we'll take the best of the worlds that we find around us. Now, they had been aware of the power of God in their past, how God had led them out of Egypt and for 40 years had taken them across the desert to the place of the promised land. but for them it was the past. And they were asking this question, so where is God now? Why are these things happening to us in this moment of time? Why are things not working out? I think they forgot that the one place God will not accept is second place. We read these words in Judges 6. I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods in the land where you live. But you have not listened to me. In spite of the fact that the people had abandoned God, God had not abandoned them, and he did not give up on them. And his primary strategy as they cried out to him for help was to send this young man, this ordinary young man, Gideon, to help them. And we are told that an angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon. And this was the message that the angel said to him. It is simply these words, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. I'm sure Gideon must be thinking to himself, as you and I must be thinking, what do you mean, mighty warrior? Really? Here is a man hiding in a cave, trying to beat out the wheat so he can have something to eat. And though we might not think that he is a mighty warrior, God saw possibilities in this man's life. And he said to Gideon, I am going to be sending you to be the deliverer of my people against the hand of the Midianites. Now, when Gideon heard that, he had lots of excuses. He simply said, well, how can I save my people? What am I supposed to do? And then he began to think about his background. He said, the family that I come from is the weakest in our tribe. And when you look at me, I am the least in my family. Do those excuses ever sound familiar? I'm sure we've made those kind of excuses in different ways when we are asked to do some things that seem to be almost impossible. Unbelief, self-doubt, and at times just the lack of courage. But this is the key. The Lord said to Gideon these words, I will be with you. See, when God calls us and when God challenges us, we never go it alone. God is always with us. But if God is with us, the question we have to ask ourselves, am I with God? And to be with God calls for a commitment. God asks his people to follow him without reservation, to be unconditionally, totally committed unto him. And so that was the call in Gideon's life. He was going to have to make a few changes. The people in his own family had built altars to the Baals, the fertility gods. But more than just his own family, his neighbors had built them as well. And God said to Gideon, the first thing you have to do is to destroy the altars to Baal. So Gideon that night went out and destroyed them. God was saying to him, Gideon, you will have no victory until you obey me completely. And that's exactly what he did. Sometimes I have to ask myself, and maybe you need to be asking this question as well, do we have competitive idols in our life? Is it our position or our possessions or our plans that have become so primary in our life that we have blended the gods of this world with our commitment to Jesus? I'm struck by the words that were written by the chronicler. In 2 Chronicles, we read this call of commitment that God has for his people, where it simply says, the eyes of the Lord are searching throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. Do you get that picture? That God is searching all over the earth to strengthen the people whose lives are fully committed to him. Many things can become false gods in our lives. And so maybe we need to ask ourselves this question: have I built another altar in my backyard? So for Gideon to destroy the altar that his family had built to the Baal would not be easy. There would be the reaction of the family. The neighbors were going to react when he destroyed theirs. And even his life was being threatened because of the actions that he had taken. But in following God, Gideon had to demonstrate his commitment by putting everything on the line. And God was going to use this man in an amazing way. Just as God will use each one of us, ordinary people, in amazing ways if we are committed to him. But you need to understand, there is not a cookie cutter approach. God looks at every circumstance and every situation and every person quite differently. And so God's approach to Gideon was very unique. And it will not be the same approach that he will use for each one of us. But I think the principles are going to be the same. There are times we think, well, God has called me to follow him and we've got it all figured out. But we don't. That's why we need to learn to listen, and we need to learn to be sensitive to what God is saying to us in the moment of time that we find ourselves in. And so for Gideon, the Lord said, you are to take the army of Israel and you are to go against the army of the Midianites. The army of Israel consisted of 32,000 soldiers. The Midianite army had 135,000 soldiers. The odds are 4 against 1. And God spoke to Gideon and said, no, you've got to do something. Here are the words: thin the ranks. And Gideon said, how am I supposed to do that? And God said, ask everybody who is afraid. And when they raise their hands and reveal their true heart, tell them they can go home. Out of 32,000 soldiers, 22,000 returned home. So now we have 10,000 Israelis against 135 of the Midianites. And God said to Gideon, thin the ranks. It's too many. And Gideon said, how are we supposed to do that? And God said, take them down to drink at the pond. And whoever just takes the water by lapping it like a dog, in other words, just falling down on the ground and drinking it because they're so thirsty, send them home. But everyone who cups the water in their hand and at the same time keeps an eye as to what's going on around, those are the soldiers that I want. When that was accomplished, there were only 300 soldiers left in the army that Gideon was to lead. So think about the numbers: 300 against 135,000. I think there's a deeper reason why God wanted to thin the ranks, because the only possibility of victory against those type of odds would be because of God's intervention in the whole situation. And they won. It's rather amazing what God will do with a few people who trust him and are prepared to risk whatever God asks them to risk. And God gave Gideon the victory over an enemy, even with these overwhelming odds that he had to face. See, Gideon was learning to live in the power of God's might. This happens when we put God first, when we seek his kingdom here on the earth, and we expect God's intervention on a continuing basis. It's not just a one-shot deal. It's to become a way of life. As we come to the end of Gideon's story, we discover that his life is mixed with greatness and with failure. The success of this battle was so tremendous that the people wanted to make him king, but Gideon absolutely refused, because he did not want to take the place of God. He recognized it was the Lord's power that had enabled them to be victorious and to bring about all the accomplishments that they had. He wanted to have God first in his life, and he wanted the people of his nation to have that very same attitude. And yet as time progressed, Gideon sadly went astray. The people still exalted him in many ways, and finally he said, "Bring me the gold that you have," and he made a golden ephod. Now an ephod is a breast covering that the priest would wear as they served before God in the temple. But this became in many ways like a shrine, and the people came and offered their praise and glory to this ephod to Gideon, and the glory was taken from the Lord. And the sad thing is, the people started to worship it. Their prayers of thanksgiving were replaced by focusing upon what Gideon had accomplished. And sadly, the nation eventually went back to worshiping the Baals. They abandoned God once more. I think that can be a warning to all of us. And the warning is, it can become easy to forget God when things are going our way. And so for this morning, or this afternoon, or whenever you are watching this, let me suggest that there are some principles that we can take as we move forward in our life. The first principle is this, that God uses people who are committed to him. God uses just very ordinary people, so we don't have to make excuses, because God is choosing each one of us. But if God chooses us, the second thing we need to learn to do is to trust that he is with us, no matter what we are facing in life. The third principle I would suggest is this, that God plus a person who is unreservedly committed to him is able to overcome great obstacles and great challenges, because God is with us. The last principle is this. We need to learn to live every day close to God. Don't stray. Keep the relationship alive and dynamic. Don't be living in the past, because we are called to live in the present moment. And ask God each day, Lord, what do you want me to do with you this day? I would ask you to remember these words from the chronicler. The eyes of the Lord are searching throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. God's eyes are searching the earth even at this moment to strengthen you, to strengthen me, because our heart is fully committed to him. Let's pray together. Lord God, thank you that you care about ordinary people like each one of us. And thank you that you have called us to be yours. And this day we want to follow you with our whole heart. We don't know exactly what you have in mind for us tomorrow or the day after, but we have today. And each day we want to renew our commitment to following you. And thank you that you will use us in ways that maybe will totally surprise us. Ordinary ways for ordinary people. And we know that as we are committed to you, you will do amazing things in the lives of others. God, give us your perspective and help us to realize that you will strengthen the heart of each one who is fully committed unto you. That is our prayer this day. and we offer it in the name of the one who has called us to be his, even Jesus our Lord. Amen.
There's a grace when the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. There was another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding of how I've been set free, there is a cross that bears the burden when another died for me. There is another in the fire. Oh, my dad left her head beneath the waters. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. And should I fall in the space between what remains of me and this reckoning, either way I won't bow to the things in this world. I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire, standing next to me. There is another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need remind what power set me free, there is a grave that holds no body. Now the power lives in me. There is another in the fire. Oh, there is another in the fire. Oh, I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness flies to him. I can feel the roar in the heavens as the space between wears thin. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. There is no